name is Shawn Alexander Allen, and among being a developer, I'm also co-organizer of the Game Does of Color Expo.
Just to kind of get started here, GDOC, as I'll call it, it's been around for several years now. I believe it's going into its seventh year in 2022. So, I'm not sure how long you've been with the event, but how has it changed over the years and I guess grown in that time that it's been around?
Yeah, so I came in the second year. Although in a lot of ways I came in the before times because like a lot of what I was doing was, talking about I don't know, looking around the industry being like, where are people like me in the industry? And then finding those people and then like whispering to them being like, the industry, this and that. And, the folks that were, into it, we'd keep talking. So Kat, who basically was the forerunner of the event, with her company, Brooklyn Gamery, like the other people, they did the first Game Does of Color Expo. We did like a panel on racing games at IndieCade back in 2014. So we've been talking about this stuff for a very long time. And the Game Does of Color Expo was born out of general frustration and everything. It was in person for a while. So the biggest thing is going online. We always had a plan to go online, because I don't know, if you want to help people worldwide, the best way is to not necessarily have to fly everybody out. So we were always really hoping to have an online presence, and then we were forced to have one in 2020. But one of the biggest things is that it's in the US, Black and brown folks are very vocal, but also in other parts of the world, you can't be as such. So it's harder to find other people like you to even organize an event like this. I've been talking to a lot of European devs of color who are who feel really outnumbered and don't feel like they can talk about things. So, our event being online is really important to be able to reach out to those folks and give them a chance to come, give a talk. And one of the other things is because we've been sponsored better and better, we've been able to pay our people better and better, which is good because that's part of our mission, is making sure that, no one's working for free. We're trying to just change the way that events are, essentially, that, tech events value people and they pay them, and game events are like, hey, pay your way and we get a ticket. And you're like, okay. And on top of that money thing is now we were able to give money out to devs. This is the third year we were able to give out money, and it's been going up and up. It went from 15K 3 years ago to 150K last year across 6 devs. And that's really important. And I think these are a little understated, but they are massive leaps because, our whole thing is just trying to help people do better in the industry.
It's interesting that you say that you guys kind of always wanted to go online. Like you mentioned, it was originally in person in New York, then pandemic hit and you kind of had to adjust and do it online. How has the online thing worked out? Has it been successful? Do you guys think that you'll probably stick with that, even if one day all the in-person stuff returns? You think that's a better model overall?
We've talked a lot about hybrid. That's what we were trying to do before. The folks at the Schomburg Center in New York are really adept at doing live streaming, which is great because we've been able to live stream some people who couldn't come to the event for visa reasons or whatever just before. So we were able to live stream it in and then live stream it out. People in the space could see the person being interviewed, and then we could send that out to the internet. But our talks just didn't get a lot of traction sometimes, but we did have a lot of people who said, hey, this was great because I couldn't fly out or I just didn't feel comfortable or whatever. And so I think, and nowadays we get ticket sales in every continent where people are. So that's really important. And, seeing a lot of African sales or East Asian, South Asian, wherever, European, the fact that people are all over the world buying tickets is awesome. So we want to keep it, we would want to do it hybrid going forward. And that's one of the things where everyone's like, oh, are you going to do it in person? And I'm like, I don't know what a hybrid event would look like. So that would be a new thing that we have to figure out how to do both simultaneously. It would cost more, et cetera. So I remember we were looking to expand to a few days in person, and that was going to balloon our costs by a lot because in person, you have a lot more things to worry about. Like for us, again, changing things, we always try to make sure that there's snacks available for everybody for free, water for free, just drinks and everything. We try to work with local merchants to make sure people get discounts on food, because it's all about trying to make an event sustainable. So the in-person sustainability, it's like in this COVID world, it's like, with everybody trying to do vax things and being like, hey, no more masks. I'm like, if we did an event, it'd be masks. We'd have to make sure that there was like enough just protocols in place to make sure that no one's getting sick and no one feels unsafe. So, it's a whole new world. So that's a big question that we have to figure out going forward. This year is going to be online only though.
Yeah, just I want to ask about Allyship, because obviously at Game Developer Color Expo, there's folks there that aren't people of color. I'm sure there's white people that come and want to support the cause and whatnot. What do you think makes like a good ally, and how can someone support game devs of color at the expo, and then just actually support people of color in video games without like crossing that line or coming across the wrong way?
I think one of the key things is working to thoroughly understand that these are systemic issues that have caused this lack of representation. It's not like a lack of wanting to do anything. It's a lack of resources, it's a big bottom down, hundreds of years, thousands of years, probably like issue, right? And understanding that it's a top down issue, I think is the first thing to understand. I say that, you always got to be inclusive about who you are. If you're a company in general, you're trying to hire more Black and brown folks, you want to come to our event, hire them. You got to actively find those folks. You might have to go to them on LinkedIn, social media, but don't make it weird, right? Don't be like, hey, you're a Black developer and we're looking for Black developers. Just be like, hey, I see you do X, Y, and Z. Would you like to talk? Maybe you could come work for us, but maybe we could also just be friends. I get a lot of weird out of nowhere, like job solicitations. And sometimes I'm like, it's like it'll happen in February and be like, hey, we were interested. And I'm like, you need to read my LinkedIn because you're asking me for programming and it's not anywhere on, I don't do programming. And they're like, well, I was just going to check. And I was like, come on, man, I know what you're doing. Clearly. I think being subversive in hiring and dealing with people and talking to people is important. I think putting your money where your mouth is, hire, pay well, funding orgs that do this work is important. Like if you can't feel like you can't do it yourself, help other people do it for you. That's where a lot of our sponsorship comes, is people say, I heard Game Devs of Color Expo understands these things, we want to put money behind you. And that's really good. And I think, honestly, there's a lot of we have to understand it's interesting in the industry that there's a lot of gender-based stuff that people are trying to do, but they ignore race issues. If in the Activision Blizzard claims, there was a whole thing about Black women being micromanaged for their time off, where they had to write papers to justify taking a few days off because they wanted to make sure they were doing their time. And it was like no women, men, whatever, were not required this. So, it's clearly, you got to understand that it's like an intersectional issue. So if you're coming at it from a gender thing, you also have to understand that there's an intersectionality where race often plays a point. And I think, just active listening is important. If people have complaints about stuff, or someone's talking and someone's giving a complaint, you need to listen to them and not necessarily jump in with a response or trying to excuse things by saying, oh, but this is the way it is and you don't know how hard it is for me. You got to be like, just listen and say, I will take this to heart, and not necessarily try to shout you down because things are difficult for me too. And you don't know, because I've had that where allies are like, well, you don't know the things, and I'm like, I don't care, because I'm telling you my issues. You need to listen there and then take that and go figure that out, how that works with the other stuff behind the scenes, right? I don't tell anybody at Game Devs of Color Expo, hey, if someone had a complaint, I'd be like, I wouldn't excuse it away. I'd say, I'm sorry, we will work to make this better, right? So if we're doing this on our end, everyone, if you want to be an ally, you have to do that for everybody. Just internalize it, and just keep trying to understand that if someone's complaining, it might not be about you, it might just be about a system that you are a part of, and just be like, okay, we will work together to try to fix this.
I appreciate your insight there. I think that a lot of times when people think they're being an ally, they're listening more so to like have a response or like an answer, rather than just to like understand and kind of get a better grasp on the situation. And it definitely comes off as like insincere. You talk about like folks reaching out in February with no context there or research, just like, hey, it's Black History Month, so like we're doing our due diligence for the one of 12 months of the year. I'm curious, so what tools and resources do you think are most important for aspiring game devs of color, maybe coming from an underprivileged background, somewhere where they're just lacking in resources? What do you think is most important for getting them kickstarted in game dev?
Yeah, it's such a weird question just for me, just because I'm like everyone's path is different. Like I got into my first like real job was at Rockstar Games, and I got in there because there was a job that popped up right at the right moment that needed like some sort of 3D film background, and I had that background. And I'm not going to tell anybody to go into that looking specifically for games, because you might not find the same thing. But I think one of the most important things is to kind of just start doing. Like that's like a problem that I personally had this passion. I was a moderator on IGN's message boards. I got a game store job. I really paid attention to the industry. That helped me out many years later when I wanted to, go to events and talk about things. But the thing I noticed is that like a lot of Black folks specifically, but like POC in general, like they come in thinking they got to hold the whole team on their back to try to like make the industry more diverse on top of being a game creator. And I'm like, nah, just come in and try to do something, make something. Like the easiest way to get into games is to just start making something small in your free time. I know that's a weird thing to say, but it's like, I learned the most from putting out like this small iOS project with friends, like during the Global Game Jam. I learned where my limits were. I learned what I could do, what I couldn't do. Our whole team, we learned that we work together as a team. 2 of those people are part of the Game Devs of Color Expo now. But like just figuring out how to make stuff. Like the interesting thing is the thing I've learned in the games industry that, and other places, that like people really value people who can finish things. And learning how to finish things is one of the most important things. And then just coming through. Like I think a great example is this developer, Rajan, who has been in the industry for a while now, got into, is working at Microsoft now, recently working with Soft Not Weak on Spirit Swap, doing a lot of things in the games industry. But when I met Rajan, they were just like, so how do I get into games? And I just said, you're here, you're at IndieCade, right? You're talking to people, just be here, do stuff. Rajan went on and made a small little mobile game that, it's not lighting the world on fire. It's not trying to win like an IndieCade award or whatever. It had really nice haptics and had a lot of, it was just solid. It was a solid thing that came out, got some sponsorships with schools to make sponsored versions of it. Now works at Microsoft, right? So it's like this tiny little mobile game. Was not trying to like make a free to play thing to make a ton of money, because you can't do that. Like that's what I'm saying. Everybody tries to come into games as like, we're going to make $1 million and like be like, no, make small art projects. It's just like if you want to be a comic book artist, you got to start learning how to draw people, right? Everybody thinks I'm just going to come in and be the next indie success. And I'm like, no, you got to come in and just try to be a person, be here, do some stuff. And that will make the industry more diverse just by having you here making things. And that'll help you along the line of trying to find a job. Finding a job in games is really hard. So it's like making things on your own time is going to be important. Like I feel like if I would have done more for myself, I would have been further along in games. But I was also working a full-time job at a game store while also going to school. And so like, I don't know. I didn't have the time for that. But if you got some time, try to make small things and finish.
Yeah, that's the most important part there. I want to bring up representation, because obviously a big part of what a Game Devs of Color Expo does, you're pushing for more representation kind of behind the scenes and the people that are making games. But I guess I want to talk about how that shines through into the games themselves, particularly with like Black characters and the way that like people of color are portrayed in games. I don't know if you saw like the Babylon's Fall stuff recently, where like the darkest skin tone was like this color, and they're like, how does this happen in 2022? Do you think that that kind of stuff is just a symptom of like a lack of diversity in the development studio, or what do you think is like what needs to happen to get better representation on the screen in big games these days?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Like I remember me, like as a person who has different skin colors depending on which body part it is, really strange. Who has changed over the years, trying to find representation, playing Tony Hawk 3. Tony Hawk 3 tied skin tone to face shape, which was really weird because like your features just got more and more and more exaggerated the darker your skin was. And I was like, what is going on here? And yeah, I mean, it's definitely a problem of like people not paying attention. But you know, nowadays it seems like it should be a solved issue, right? Because we've all talked about it, we've seen the games. I think like Neo or Nio or whatever it's called, like that game has dope representation. A Japanese developed game. We've seen lots of Japanese developers do great things. I still think about Killer 7 from Grasshopper Manufacturer that has Black, Puerto Rican, Mexican, everybody like all over the place, and they're part of a 7-person team, and they are smashed down personality wise, but it's a cell shaded game. Everybody looks like people. It's nice. It's great. Like, so there really are no excuses anymore. Kind of like what I was talking about before. There's like, I think it's more of like there's a systematic problem though. Like I think it's like bait when we think just about like what do they look like, because there's a lot of other problems there. Like yeah, the character creators are weird. But like I've been noticing that we've been seeing like, the push for tokenism. And people accepting it. Like we've seen games with great looking Black characters that have terrible narratives or have terrible narrative tropes at play, like that they're like their Black character who doesn't have a dad, and that's like leads to a problem in their life, right? And it's just like, why? Like you can do anything with them. And we've been seeing great looking Black characters that are voiced and possibly mocapped by white people, which I coined many years ago as digital blackface. And I'm like, and you have other directors being like, that's great that I could put this white person in the body of a Black person. And I'm like, they did that with Soul also, right? Like they turned, that's the other, turning Black people into animals. Like that's like a, like, oh, this is a jazz movie, but it's actually about Tina Fey. They do that in games too a lot. We have a lot of Black characters that look great that are relegated to side characters. There's games that came out recently where all the side characters look great, but then the game stars a white savior character, and it's a white savior narrative, and that person might also be appropriating other ethnicities, cultures. There's one game starring a Black character that looks great, has another Black character that looks worse, and then is murdered by a 2-dimensional Latino gang. And you're just like, what is going, like a 1-dimensional gang that just throws out. So it's like, they spent a lot of time on the main character and then just used other ethnicities to basically like flatten everything. And it's people like, they spend all their effort on one thing and then they just lose out at the end. And it's like, none of it's good if you're just like dropping the ball at some point, right? Like, so I think we need to look at systems. We need to really we need more people really care in the roles making these decisions. That's because again, like we've seen that you can do really well if you care and you spend the time to do it. I've talked to people and I've heard some weird things where people just, they lose energy. They think that they're doing one thing right, but they don't pay attention to other things. But that's because we don't have great writing rooms. I don't think we don't have writing rooms with diverse groups of writers. One of my favorite TV shows for a while was Totally Biased with W. Kamau Bell. And that, like, he's a 6'4" Black man on the show. They've got like someone from like Indian background from Queens, right? Like as a writer and a comedian, Hari Kondabolu. Like I love that guy. Like they have like a gay white man on the crew. They had like lots of different people and they all showed up on the show and they were all writers behind the thing. So they all had sign off on jokes, right? Like somebody is not going to do something that's going to really upset people. I've talked to a lot of comedians about their writing rooms, their writing staffs, and that's what they try to do. They try to make sure that they're not punching, like the good ones are trying not to punch down at people. So they spend a lot of time paying a lot of attention. But in the games industry, I feel like people say, oh, I got this one good Black character, let's forget about the rest. And again, like I don't think we have a lot of Black writers in rooms. We don't have a lot of groups of people that are like diverse in rooms. Like a lot of times we have these like white auteur men and women who veto things that feel out of their comfort zone. And I've heard these things like in stories. So it's just like, the culture in general needs to just get better. and folks need to bring in writers that are working with them and not opposed to them. Like we've all heard the story of writers over here, developers over here, bring it together, and then developer says, oh no, we're not going to support any of that, or oh, writer says, oh, we blah blah. So then you get something that's really weird. And so, you know, it's a bigger problem, because again, we've seen that in the right hands you can do really well. So it should be a solved problem.
Yeah, I think that comes from a lot of devs or writers or studios or even publishers kind of treating representation in games like trying to hit like a quota, or like trying to hit a certain benchmark, so like people don't yell at them on Twitter or their game doesn't get pulled from shelves or whatever. Then after that, like, okay, now we can do whatever we want. And that's why it comes across how you were describing. You were talking earlier about how Game Does a Color Expo has just grown over years, gotten more sponsors, gotten bigger. I'm curious, do you guys have like just some like guidelines or principles, something that you kind of commonly refer to or come back to as you plan the event, just to keep it grounded and make sure that you don't really lose sight of that original vision?
Yeah. So yeah, like again, we kind of came together, just like the event was initially just like, would this work? And it was like having game devs of color come together, showing their games and giving talks. Would anybody be interested in it? And then when the answer was yes, it took us a few years to really you know, come together, and like we all have our ideas, so we had to come together, and you know, we did like sessions that come up with a mission statement, which is, you know, to amplify the creative power held by people of color in games. And the concept there is that we're not giving them power, because people already have creative power, right? They're already like, people don't need us to make them better at what they're doing. A lot of people just need resources and a direction to go in, right? Like, so we're just trying to and make them feel valued and let people come together as a community and try to introduce them to as many people as they can, get them some money so that they can do some stuff, get them jobs. You know, it's really important that all of our sponsors are really, like, one of the things I always tell our sponsors is that they ask us, like, how is it best to interact with people? And I say, just talk to them. Like, if you get people from Game Deals or Color Expo interview or sending you their resume, you need to answer them. Like, even if it's a no, like, don't give form letters, because like so many people send out form letters. I'm like, that's one of the number one problems. Like, how's someone supposed to learn if you don't take them under your wing and say, hey, like, some of this stuff really isn't at the level that we need. Can we maybe partner you with somebody to help you? You know, that would be great, right? Like, but it's all people, I've applied to a lot of jobs in games, and having, you know, over a decade of experience, people just, I don't get answers sometimes. I've gotten recommended by like the heads of studios to a person, never gotten a call back, which is super funny. It's just like, so I always think about, if I'm having this hard time and I have a lot more experience in games, I've come from Rockstar, I've done all this stuff, what is it like the new person starting? So like, I always try to talk to just sponsors, talk to everybody, and say, like, please just treat people like people. Like, it's one of the most important things. There's a lot of other things, like, I really believe in giving folks their first speaking gigs is really cool, because like for years I still don't know how to get into certain events, like on a regular basis. Like, if you try to submit a talk, you'll be like, yeah, this is the talk, they're totally going to accept this. And they're like, I am sorry, but this talk, blah, 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 is not accepted. It is a competitive. I'm like, nah, man. No, like, I like, what? Like, this was a good one. And then you see the event, you're like, you don't even have a talk like this. Like, what's going on? And so we really try to focus on, giving people that chance. Like, we had someone who had 10 lessons from 10 years in game development. And then we also had someone my first year in the games industry, right? Those are two people giving their first talks in games. One's a vet, one's brand new. And you know, and then we pay them for their time too. So that's like another important, is that we invite them, we pay them for their time, so that, you know, they're not losing anything for giving us this effort. And that also starts them on their path to, you know, wanting to do more speaking. We've seen a lot of our speakers go from speaking at our event to hosting podcasts, hosting giant events, like all this stuff. Like, and they come back and they say, this was because Game Deals with Color Expo gave me a chance. Back when we were in person, I specifically invited people out and said, we will give you money, we'll pay for your flight to come out here. And they were like, oh, good. Like, I don't have to worry about like just coming out to New York or whatever. So like just giving people actual opportunities. So opportunity is the big thing we talk about. Unpaid opportunities is something for us. So like or no low paid opportunities. So if somebody's like, hey, we got this opportunity to do some judging for some awards, and you calculated it, I've seen one of these where I calculated it out where it was below minimum wage per hour to play games for a judging thing. And I just said, we are not going to share this among our community because we don't want them to feel like they're missing out on an opportunity, because we're not going to share it because it seems like we're giving the blessing on it. And I think it seems exploitative. So we're not going to do that. So we've actually work really hard to curate what info we share with people. And just, keeping our talent pool diverse is really important. Like, because, our event is already diverse. We don't do diversity 101 talks. We don't want anyone talking about like who they are really, because everyone always gets invited to just talk about who they are. And we want them to talk about the dope stuff that they do, because I can already see who you are. You can wrap that in your talk, absolutely. But like, we don't want to reduce you to, I am a person from a country, or I am a person from this background, and this is why it's important to support me, because that's already our baseline. Yes, you are important. You're here. So let's talk about like what is in your brain, right? What do you want to talk about? The best talks I've had is when people invited me and said, just talk about what you want to talk about, because you're a smart person and we want you here for that, rather than please come talk about diversity. And so on that other end, for our games and our speakers, we then still look into it. So like, let's say we have like 5 games by people that are similar on our thing and they're all really good, but then we see, oh, we're missing a tabletop game, or we're missing this representation in our group or whatever. We'll then like reevaluate our game selection process. We try to avoid just necessarily doing people that we know, because we obviously have our own Rolodex that keeps growing, but it's all about giving people first chances. So we always will reevaluate. We'll look at our thing and say, I know, like if we have 30 games, we'll be like, oh, we know like 20 of these people. And let's reevaluate and see if there was somebody that we're missing, somebody that we didn't vote for because of our own biases, right? Like, so we're always constantly trying to, it's like the thing you're supposed to do. It's like the confirmation bias, or just biases of the leaning to the people we try to still do it in this smaller space, which then means that more people come and more people see more games that are interested in, and then that means there's still something for everybody, which has been very successful, because people are like, oh, this Game Devs of Color Expo is super like queer inclusive, and we're like, yes, because if you have one value at the top and then you mix it in, you will tend to get everybody, right? Like we do get everybody. We get like our ethnic, like our ethnicity, racial background, like survey is super diverse. Still a lot of white people, obviously, like you said before. But they don't people don't feel like othered at our event at all, because we don't other anybody, because we're already the other. So like, let's be, and we try to like avoid using too much like soft language like inclusive, because we are inclusive by definition. And so we're trying to, again, like elevate the language. Like, we are an event, we're here, now come to it. Like, this is like other GDC basically. Like it's like, we're not like the DEI group. We're serious about teaching you how to make games just from other people.
That's really dope. Just to kind of get towards wrapping up here, I'm curious. I know you're still pretty early, I would imagine, planning this year's show, but is there anything specific that you're really excited about, whether it be like a panel or maybe like a game or something that's coming up?
Yeah, I mean, all the submissions are coming up soon. So it's hard to, don't really know. But like I do speaker curation, and I'm really hoping to do another hip hop and games panel. That's something I wanted to do for the last couple of years, but I put it off, hoping we'd go back to in person. But now I'm going to accept we're online, and let's see. Like I've been talking to artists and developers about like putting that together for years now, and I really want to have, with the talk of like features and stuff, I really want to have, because there's a lot of really cool creators who are trying to who are modding like black hair into Sims, or just doing really cool 3D art in that space, or there's the black hair library, right, by one of the Game Devs of Color Expo alumni, AM Dark, right? Like, so I would love to get a panel where we talk about these things and like the quote unquote challenges, the things you see in the world, but also just like how you're seeing success at what you're doing by like trying, like by modding these things. And like you saw like one of the Twitter creator like getting like partnered with EA or whatever because they were working on Sims stuff. So we're seeing, we're seeing stuff getting pushed forward by people just trying to do that. And I just like to have people there to talk about what they're doing and how interesting it is, because it's really interesting to me, but I don't know how many people know about it. Yeah, gamedevsofcolorexpo.com. Not game developers of color expo, just game devs of color, or you could just do gdocexpo.com. At GDOC Expo on Twitter, or those are the best places. If you want to also just follow me, I'm Shawn, SHAWN AA on Twitter. And yeah, and like everybody else is linked on there.